So welcome to another Bitesize Edge podcast. And today I've got the absolute pleasure of speaking not only to someone who I hold in high esteem for what she does as a living or for a living, but also as a great friend. So welcome, Ali King-Smith.
Morning.
Morning. Is it morning? I don't think it is.
Not
I think we're afternoon.
It's afternoon.
But
It is
time
Monday.
is what we want it to be right now, isn't it? And there's an abundance of it, bizarrely. So, Ali, you're in a professional world. You're the director of ClearWorks Coaching. Coaching, as a term, I think potentially limits what you do, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But actually, we've known each other for how long? 3 years, 4 years?
Oh, at least, yeah, maybe more. Yeah.
Possibly 5 years, actually, when I think back, when our paths crossed, when we both worked as an associate for another training coaching company. And that was some time back. And gosh, haven't our worlds changed since then?
Yes, I think we shared, my only first class flight across the Atlantic, didn't we?
Wasn't that just amazing? I've never done that before or after.
No, champagne all the way. That's how we met.
Absolutely. Albeit it was very early in the morning. Who cared? But there we are. So ClearWorks Coaching would automatically lead me. I'd hang on to the word coaching from that. And coaching, in essence, for me, is something which I feel can be perceived as being quite diluted now. So knowing your ideas, being innovative, what are you doing so different, Ali?
Well, my background is all kinds of people development, L and OD really, where we're talking about OD as organisational development. Our mission is to really go digging for what's the thing here that we're trying to cause, so looking at that first. And then I would describe coaching as a coaching stance more than we always do coaching. It's actually a listening, curious, non-judgmental way of being in the world, which helps you then address what you're trying to cause.
But like an approach, Ali, would you say it's almost like an approach or a mechanism? Yeah. Right.
Yes, it is even more than an approach. It is the way of being in the world. It's coming at it with questions rather than with solutions or judgment, or this is definitely true. Over the years, my passion has repeatedly taken me back to helping more women get to the top of places, or not to the top, but to build the balanced, lovely life that they want to build in a context which is clearly more tricky for the ladies. And that's taken me increasingly into the world of science, the lovely meeting place between science and creativity, so the biotech, STEM, pharma, that those kind of places we hang out a lot. And then in terms of what we're doing that's innovative with coaching, it's looking at the psychology of groups and the belonging to groups and building groups of very fabulous women together in order to use a coaching stance to help them develop themselves. So we do other things too, but that's the energizing, exciting.
Okay, so tell me a bit more about how, so bringing your words, a group of lovely women together within a coaching environment. How does that work then? What's the magic that sits within that? What do you tend to see happen?
Well, we know all the models of psychology. If you look up any psychology model, it'll have somewhere in it a mention of belonging or relatedness or participation. It's about being part of a gang. And that tribe building psychology we build on purpose. So super duper contracted confidentiality, high trust, and then the ability to challenge each other hard comes because the trust is there. So we tend to contract a period of time, either a year, sometimes 6 months, where these women meet in the same group repeatedly, maybe 6 women, 6 times with the same coach. And first of all, before we start, we do a kind of diagnostic. What are you trying to cause in this organisation? For example, we work in an organisation in Switzerland where they know they're losing women from level 8 in the organisation, but they don't know why. So level 8 is just before top seniority, and these women drop out. And so that's the challenge. How do we help more women decide to stay? And if they don't stay, can we find out why they don't? So we bring the women together, we build a contract of trust, we explore what coaching is and that it's about questions, not solutions. And then the role of the coach is to help these amazing brains help each other. So we don't go in with all the answers, we go with all the questions and then share the questions between them.
And is there ever any conflict for these ladies. So they're hugely scientific brains, which by virtue of which go through a process and an end result. Yeah. Is there ever any conflict for them with that around the whole asking the question, not providing the solution?
Yes, I think it's a journey. I think it's fair to say that the questions asked in section 4 are different from the ones in module 1.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting and exciting fallout that we didn't expect. So actually, the coaching capability is raised as well. So people become better coaches as a result of going through it. So if an organisation has stated we want to raise the coaching capability in this place, we can do it by stealth without having to send everybody on a coach development programme. They become better coaches. But that measure of rightness that very scientific brains have had across their whole career. So they do physics A level. It's not okay just to have a view. It has to be absolutely accurate to get them the grade they want. They get an engineering degree that's based on accuracy. They become a leader based on accuracy. But then this EQ, this emotional intelligence about how to flex their leadership style, is something that's left to the side, doesn't often get brought in until later. And so,
and have you found that they want it? They recognise that it's something which is very powerful, that not only will it help them within their role, but also, if you said, from coaching a team, but also is there almost lack of it in their world? There's been a lack of the opportunity to embrace the kind of EQ in their world by virtue of the scientific life that they lead.
Yeah, I think probably the answer to do they want it is that half do and half don't, or some do, some don't. So some people have had the joy of a great leader and they understand what it feels like to be coached, or that they were asked a great question by someone and they felt what their cogs of the brain felt like. It was magic, it was different. And then some people don't know that they want it and they don't like it. And when they first start, they're like, just tell me the answer, because that's just boring, asking me more questions. But once they get into the flow of it and they start to see somebody else's cogs were, and they see what it looks like when someone's thinking brilliantly, and they experience what it feels like to have a penny drop really well, they start to buy into it. And not everybody buys into it. Not everybody likes it. It's not for everyone. But we do quite a clear description of what the environment is before people apply. And then we have an aspirational application process that people have to try and get on the programme. So it feels exciting to win a place. So people come ready, full of beans to work as a group.
Okay. And obviously, without sharing, breaking any confidences, where have you seen the greatest wins? Are there any common themes as well, Ali, that fall into this?
Loads of common themes and loads of surprising wins, I think it's fair to say. So we've had some sort of classic measures that we'd be looking for, like I had the big conversation that I wasn't going to have, or I asked for the pay rise, or I quit the job I hated. Sometimes that happens. So some of those definitely happen. There are others which are more subtle. So we use a strengths focus, people hunting for their strengths, and people find strengths and joy and mission and purpose in themselves that they didn't know they were missing. So that can be very exciting. Somebody suddenly accelerates their career by finding something that they love. Or it can be all the classics, imposter phenomenon, and the people who feel like they're going to be found out suddenly realizing actually other people do rate what I do. And I think one of the themes I see a lot is people who do a thing well, but they don't realise that other people don't. So like people that can bake a beautiful cake, they think that making a cake is really easy. But I can't make a good cake. It's a thing, being able to make a good cake. And people who are good at something often underrate that skill. They just think everybody can do it. So helping somebody really make friends with their strengths and really start to power them up, that's a big theme that we see quite often.
I get that. I can't bake a cake, and I've got a lot of people who would absolutely support that as fact, Ali, without a shadow of a doubt. Not least of all, Jules's girls, who I once convinced them to leave it in baking for an extra 5 minutes, and the cakes they were baking, their mum, came out like rocks. But never mind. But I get the, in essence,
checking your sources.
Yeah. I get the I get where you're coming from with that, and it's quite interesting in the world of NLP when we have a lot of business women who will come on the course, or a lot of women who have been in fairly senior roles who have then taken maybe a career break to be a mum or something like that, and now going back to kind of the workplace. And often, and is often, the theme that can run through is a lack of belief in their ability. They know, factually, they know they're highly capable, but they'll be the first people to doubt their capability when surrounded with others. It's not that they're good enough, it's they don't necessarily think they're comparable.
Yes.
And often without evidence to support it.
Yeah, and often their circumstances change. So the thing that used to work before they had a baby, so running like heck and working all hours, suddenly runs out of steam because they can't do what they were doing before, or maybe physically they're different. So I coach quite a few women who are physically smaller than the big guys standing up at the front of the stage, and they're trying to hold their own against this white alpha male status that we see so often, for example. So trying flexible ways, and in a group you can get great feedback from people you trust to say, this works, this doesn't work, have you tried this, I did this is what it was like for me. So all that sort of sharing, that's magical too.
And how's that then fed back into the wider business for their male companions at those at that level 8, for instance? How is their learning and their aha moments, how do they feed that back into the business, and is there a shift on the back of that, do you think?
Yeah, so I think the critical part of that question is in making sure you do it in the right place to start with. So when I first started this work, tried to peg it on somewhere which was absolutely fantastically cartoon version of sexist, so it was just an awful environment. We found it very difficult to get any traction. The women were, I think it's fair to say, mocked for coming to a group like it was a knitting circle. That was the language that was used, and that was very difficult to make traction. Now we've learned to go and get the buy-in first, so we find high-level sponsors who are male and female to come along and buy into the idea first of all, and then there's a kind of kick-off at the beginning. We tell them and the managers that they're going to have to work harder. So if you've got a member in a group, as if you're a manager, you're going to have to lean in, offer them more help, more thinking, more questions, and so on yourself. So we link it in right from the beginning, and we don't let it be an L&D peg on, sign up for this course if you like. It's absolutely coming attached to the problem that the organisation is trying to address, keeping hold of women, for example. And then so it's in the knitting of the organisation as it goes, and then each woman has full responsibility when she's in the group to be looping back with her manager. So there's a whole feedback process that goes from the woman to the manager.
Yeah.
And then at the very end of it all, there's a kind of show and tell where everybody gathers again, the stakeholders. The higher the better. If it can be the CEO, then great. They get involved all the way through.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, that's accountability at all levels, all the way through, isn't it? But that buy-in, that investment, exactly where you need it to be to get the outcomes that you're seeking, or the individuals are seeking. Is there? Yeah, we talked about. You talked about one of the things that might come through from a group of females working in this environment. Have you had any themes that have come through which have really surprised you?
Well, every single time an incredible woman tells me that she thinks she might get found out, that she's rubbish at what she's doing, that she doesn't feel confident, it blows my mind. I look at them and go, what? Whenever you see someone amazing saying that, it's a shock. But you'd think it would become less of a shock because over the years I've heard so many people saying it. But it can be helpful for people to experience that shock in other people. So when they say, I feel scared, or I feel overwhelmed, people go, well, you look amazing, and nobody would know. And actually that is quite helpful. I'm never unshocked by some of the stories of sexism that I hear, still all the time. And I'm starting, of course, to really raise my awareness of the intersection of where gender meets another form of diversity challenge. So women who are gay, for example, women of colour, earn less, don't get the promotions, have a harder time than white women do. So it's easy for us to be campaigning for white women, but there's a whole world of other work for us to be doing, and I'm just beginning on that journey. I'm not the person to be making that stand on a podcast because I'm so early in my journey, but it's very, very important that we do.
But it's something that's come into your awareness massively.
Oh, big time. It's been on my awareness. I feel as if it's important, but clearly what we're doing is not enough. We need to be fighting harder with all that. So I'm learning all the time about that. But the reason these groups are so great is that they pull on that. So they will hunt for people of diversity to come together, and that includes all sorts of diversity.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So as a mum as well, Ali, so you have a son and a daughter, and as your experience,
two boys, 2 girls, yeah. 4 kids.
Yeah, sorry, of course you have 2 boys, 2 girls. Sorry. So for the girls, thinking about the girls and your awareness within everything that you've done and the themes that have come through, what messages would you share with the girls? And actually, what messages would you share with the boys? Because it's equally as important, isn't it? That's the whole principle of what we're talking about here. That there's a learn to be had from either gender when it comes to how we work together and move forward. So, what would be your key messages to your children about what you've learned?
That's a big question. So there's lots and lots that starts very, very young that fascinates me. I'd like to give the advice to parents more than the children, really. We congratulate boys on robustly challenging rules and getting strong and resilient at surviving being told off. They're really good at that because they've been pushing the boundaries since they were tiny, where the girls are standing in line and doing as they're told and underlining their homework with the right colour pen. That there is an early learning of doing as you're told that girls seem to have, and I'm not backing that up in white papers, but it's clearly blooming obvious if you watch. Apparently women criticise or praise their sons crawling as a baby more than they praise little girls crawling as a baby. So we've got biases and crap that starts really early. So, but that's not answering your question. In terms of what I would say to them, for the girls, I would say hold your space. Challenge it if it doesn't go right. I've got a really strong memory of my daughter in her 6th form being on a law course as an extracurricular thing with her boyfriend. The pair of them worked on a project together all the way through, and then he got a higher score than she did in that. And we were raging about it, but we didn't go in about it, and that I could scream about just letting that sit. So that sort of thing I would definitely challenge. For the boys, it's learning, listening, understanding that brute force is not the only way, and that throwing good men in their way so they see gentle, strong role models, understanding that helping each other, the strengths of each other. I think that would be my main thing, would be to understand the diverse strengths of each gender and how to help each other, how to learn from each other.
Yeah. I remember a conversation I overheard many years ago with a friend of mine who's was talking to her daughter. Her daughter had come home from school and was talking about how she was being needed, and her brother was there because he was in the same school as well. And I remember kind of standing there going, "Oh my Lord, my gosh!" And the father said, "Well," he looked at the son and he said, "Well, you need to be over there. Next time it's happening, go and thump the boy that's doing it or the girl that's doing it." It's kind of like, really? And he said, "Well, I'm not always going to be there." He said, "Well, then I'll rock up and do it." And the approach was it was brute force, really. Even if it was metaphoric, it was around, and it was very much the male gender would go and resolve the situation. And just through that simple, whether you buy into it or agree with it or not is irrelevant, but through that simple dialogue, which probably took no more than about 3 minutes, we're embedding beliefs and behaviours and stereotypical views of the world.
Yes.
Which is quite phenomenal, isn't it? So as a parent, my gosh, there's so much for us to learn, and to be on top of our game to help avoid but also redirect things in a different way.
Yes. I watched a fascinating interaction on a train where a little girl and a little boy, both aged about 4, were sitting on a train seat, both flashing their knickers, is the way that they were sitting. And they were both playing with a little Nintendo game. And the mum said to the girl, "That's not very ladylike, sitting with your knickers on the show," and said nothing to the boy. And the girl lost concentration on the Nintendo and moved herself on her chair so that she pulled her dress down and covered her pants. And so the boy ends up with the Nintendo and completely not having to share it anymore, while the girl ends up covering her knickers. And I was like, that is the world right there. That was a summary of life at the moment. And I would say to the girl, don't worry about the knicker thing, just play with the Nintendo, or make sure
hang on to the Nintendo, whatever you do.
Make sure you've got the Nintendo in your hand before you straighten your frock, love, because it's going to be harder to get it back.
There's a metaphor there, definitely.
Yeah.
So moving forward, Ali, let's project 6 months or so down the line, or even longer. Where would you like to be moving the work that you're doing? Where would you like to move it forward to? Are there some other themes you'd really like to be focusing on as well?
Yeah, well, I think this period of lockdown has given us all time to think big about the world. I started my career as a physiotherapist, and my love of the human body and our respect for it is wide awake at the moment, having had this. Obviously, there's a lot of threat to our health globally, and we've had a chance to be home more, to exercise more, and so on. And I'm really starting to focus on the women who come to these circles exhausted and overstretched and consistently overwhelmed, and wondering how we can really be focusing on whole body, whole heart as a leader, and moving away from this paradigm that we all have to be absolutely knackered all the time, because it's not working globally. It's not a great plan. So that's in my radar. I'm also writing quite a bit more, and starting to love that personally. So I can see writing featuring more on the horizon over the next 6 months. But those two things in combination, I'm putting together a program for circles, which have been delivering. They've all been going B2B, so we go into organisations and we set up the ClearWorks coaching circles that I've described. But there's also something on my mind to go B2C, to go straight to these women and take them out of the workplace in tiny groups, maybe groups of 4 when we're allowed to travel more, and combine coaching with wellness of all sorts, including delicious grub that's big in quantity but not made out of crap, and exercise and walking in the rain and all sorts of ways to keep leaders in touch with their bodies. So that's brewing at the moment. It's not fully formed.
Exciting.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Excellent. Okay, so finally, Ali, if people want to get hold of you, so people who are listening to this podcast want to find out more about your coaching circles, whether it's a B2B element or B2C element moving forward, how best can they get hold of you?
I'm on LinkedIn. My name's ALY Kingsmith, Ali Kingsmith. I'm easy to find on there. And my email is probably the easiest way. Should I give the email address?
Yeah, we'll add it on as a link as well, but far away.
Ali, ALY, at clearworkscoaching.co.uk.
Fabulous. Okay, that's brilliant. And before we hang up, Ali, on this one, if you were going to leave one piece of advice to all these fabulous women, come on now.
It would be sleep more, eat well, get lots of fresh air, and surround yourself with people who believe in you even more than you believe in you all of the time. Get away from anything that drags you down.
Absolutely. Cut the chains on those ones. Ali, thank you very much for your time today. I've really appreciated it. Thanks. And it's fabulous hearing about the work that you do. I know it changes people's lives. I had the pleasure of meeting one of these super fabulous women that you worked with previously. I did a bit of work with, if you remember, and it was phenomenal to hear how she spoke about the work you did. So, a massive endorsement there. So for those of you listening, you can find us on iTunes and on Spotify, where there are many other Edgeites and other fabulously interesting people that we've had the opportunity to speak to. But as for now, thank you, Ali. I really appreciate your time, and hook up with you very soon.
Thanks, Pip. Look forward to seeing you.